ChatGerry, using stochastic tool for investigating risks of CVD and CKD, number 1546, VPT 099, February 23, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category CVD, CKD and Methodology. This study asks a very simple and very practical question: if the human body is always fluctuating and no measurement is perfectly accurate, how confident can we be about our long-term structural conclusions? I have already examined my 17-year record from 2010 to 2026 using descriptive narrative analysis, topology, and the viscoplastic energy method, and all three approaches told the same story. The stochastic method is not introduced to change that story but to test its reliability under real-world uncertainty. My work has one central goal: to make invisible pathophysiology visible and usable in daily life. If a model cannot guide a real decision, it has no preventive value. Stochastic thinking simply adds one more layer of realism, because both the measuring device and the human body contain natural variation. Chronic disease does not behave like a static number. Living tissues and organs are time-dependent and path-dependent, which means that today's condition reflects the entire history of metabolic load rather than a single laboratory value. A snapshot can help with an acute decision, but a long-term record shows the true trajectory. This is why my medical research is based on continuous observation of one fully instrumented biological system over 17 years. Population studies are essential for general trends, but a dense longitudinal record is the only way to identify the governing mechanism inside a time-dependent system. In this study, I focused on two major mortality risks: cardiovascular disease CVD and chronic kidney disease CKD, and on two dominant metabolic drivers: body weight, represented by BMI, and diabetes, represented by EC. The deterministic VMT analysis already showed that glucose control plays the primary structural role, but the stochastic extension allows me to see whether that hierarchy remains valid when natural fluctuation is included. The idea is simple: every long-term measurement contains a stable center and a fluctuation band around that center. The average value or mean represents the long-term load, and the standard deviation represents how much that load moves up and down. Instead of using one fixed stress value, I use three levels: low, mid, and high to form an energy range rather than a single energy number. In daily language, this converts a clean calculation into a realistic physiological reliability band. When my entire 17-year period is included, the glucose variation appears large. This does not mean instability. It reflects the long journey from my earlier years, 2010 to 2013. Severe hyperglycemia to near normal control after 2014. That large sigma fluctuations tells the recovery story. When I calculate the same variation only for the stable period after 2014, both BMI and EC show narrow fluctuation bands, which represent true metabolic stability in my present condition. This distinction is important. A large variation can mean either instability or recovery across a long distance. In my case, the early high glucose values create a large historical span, while the recent years show a tightly controlled and predictable system. After applying the stochastic stress levels to the same strain trajectories of CVD and CKD, the result remains unchanged. The energy generated by AG is consistently higher than the energy generated by BMI across the entire uncertainty range. This means that, for my case, diabetes has been the dominant driver of both cardiovascular and renal structural evolution in this 17-year system, while body weight has remained secondary and highly stable during the control period. At the same time, the narrowing of the energy band after 2014 provides something very important for real life. It is a direct quantitative sign of increasing metabolic stability. In engineering terms, the load has been stabilized and the probability of sudden structural failure has been reduced. In physiological terms, long-term glucose control has transformed a high-risk environment into a predictably and protected state for both blood vessels and the kidney microcirculation. The key message is very practical. Chronic disease is not governed by isolated laboratory thresholds but by total metabolic load applied over time and by the stability of that load when glucose remains controlled for many years. It does not simply improve a number on a report. It continuously reduces the internal stress on the vascular system and the kidney, increases system stability, and lowers the probability of catastrophic events. In reality, no dataset is perfectly accurate, and no biological system is completalistal. For this reason, every deterministic result contains uncertainty. And that is why stochastic thinking always has value. In my case, It confirms something very personal and very important, the reason my CVD and CKD have not returned since 2014 is not luck but the long-term stabilization of my metabolic load. Disclaimer: I write this not for fame but to share what I have learned so that others can understand their own health, prevent disease, and live longer and more stable lives. This content is for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights belong to the author. Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.